Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
So, as advertised as Shabbos, throughout the United States, the organization called NASAC, National Association of Chevra Kadishas, which our Chevra Kadisha is a member of, and actually particularly close to Rabbi Zone, who runs that, is pushing for people to have a better understanding about traditional burial, traditional preparation for burial. So I really am taking that opportunity today to talk about things that I see very often. Today's lecture, which I called it Preparing for One's Final Journey, will touch on the spiritual in the sense that if we are prepared materially, it's great spiritual preparation for yourself, for your friends and loved ones. As advertised, I have I'm almost weekly, if not daily, interaction with this. I'm the rabbinical head of the Chevra Kadisha. Just the past 2 days, I dealt with a few things on these type of matters. My legal background is in trusts and estates, so the things I picked today, I think, are just common things that I saw. It's by no means comprehensive. I would say this is just a primer about things which everybody should be thinking about. So I said on Shabbos, I'll just reiterate that when I was in law school, I can never imagine just being a lawyer and doing transactions and not having deep relationships with people. So I'm thinking, what kind of law would I do where I possibly could have a deep relationship? So I decided I'd be a family attorney because you get to know the families like really well. And I actually had an offer to intern with one of the number one family attorneys in the state of Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, really top attorney. And I mentioned this to Mori Verebi Hagoyin of Shmuel Kamenetsky, and Shmuel Kamenetsky told me absolutely not. And he said very simply, if you are a family attorney, you will always be hurting people, period. Because you have to represent your client, and that doesn't make a difference of which mother or which father or how the state should be divided. If you're in family law, your job is to represent your client and not to be judicious necessarily. So he was very against that. When I discussed trust in estates, he thought that was great. And he said, trust in estates really inherently, you get to help people. When I was in law school, I think I mentioned this over the years once or twice, I had a professor, my trust in estates professor. His name is Bruce Mann. So Bruce Mann at the time had been a University of Pennsylvania law school professor for many years. He later had a demotion, and he's now in Harvard University. But the reason he went to Harvard is because his wife, his wife's name is Elizabeth Warren, who was a senator in Massachusetts. So Bruce Mann is married to Elizabeth Warren, and Bruce Mann would start every trusts and estates class, literally every class, with as follows. He had cut out about 30 years of Dear Anne and Dear Abby articles. And they were always about a family feud. And they were always about family feuds that happened because of end-of-life issues. Obviously, Dear Anne and Dear Abby had many topics they talked about, but he specifically looked for the ones that were talking about end-of-life issues, whether it was care for a parent at the end of life, whether it was estate planning. And really, it would start like, my sister got this, I hate her guts. And so Professor Mann would start, what could you do to prevent this? And he always said, every one you see on this paper of these real life family things could have either been prevented or mitigated. If they had the right preparations, it could have been prevented or mitigated. Now, we just read a few weeks ago that when Joseph interprets Paro's dreams, after telling Paro that you need somebody to collect all of the produce for the next 7 years, because what's going to happen is that there's going to be this famine. And if you're not prepared for the famine, you're going to starve. But if you're prepared, you'll be okay. So what does Yosef say? You need an ish, chacham, v'navon, a wise and discerning man. And then at that point, Paro says, there's nobody wiser and more discerning than you, Joseph. You should be the viceroy of Egypt. But the Mefarshim, the commentators, say, why was it necessary to appoint a wise and discerning person? And the answer the Bali Musar give is because when things are going right, when everyone's healthy, and everyone's happy, and you're going on with your life, very few people prepare ahead of time. And to be a wise and discerning person is a person who sees into the future. Right now, things are going smoothly. Right now, nobody's sick. Right now, we have money. Right? A wise and discerning person says, okay, I'm 35 years old, I'm 28 years old, I'm 50 years old. Let me prepare for my retirement. But more importantly, let me prepare that my family shouldn't be hurt. That I should get my, your last will and testament. You think about those words. Your last statement, your last reality in this world, and you don't know where that's going to be. So we need to be wise and discerning to plan ahead of time. Because if we don't make the decisions, others will. And very often, the wrong decisions are very often, you'll end up having a story that could be in Dear Ann or Dear Abby, of hurting people, of forcing people to make decisions that they should not be making, to ripping families apart over lack of proper preparation. I know people, because I've even got calls, just because of my background, from people from different communities. They asked me to get involved. And I remember I had one case from Florida. They knew I have a rabbi, I have trust states, so they called me up. This family, the parents destroyed their kids because the kids don't talk. They got sick over a well, literally physically sick. And so much of that was very preventable. So we're going to talk about these type of topics today. And if we're wise and discerning, if we're chacham v'navan, we will help ourselves. If you have parents or grandparents, loved ones, children, relatives, this is very pertinent and germane information for everybody at every age. Number one, first topic I will just discuss, being about wise and discerning, chacham v'navan, is life insurance. There are over a dozen major tshuvas, major responsa about life insurance. All either say it's a good idea or it's actually a commandment. If you're Ashkenazi, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva where he said, why is it responsible? Because some people would say it's a lack of faith. What are you buying life insurance when you're very young? Now, I'll tell you, I've had life insurance for years. Why do I have life insurance for years? I don't know if I would have thought about it in my 20s, but my father-in-law, it was insistent that I get life insurance. Why does my father-in-law insist? My father-in-law was one of the heads of something called Hatzalah in New York. He actually had the largest private paramedic company, personal business in New York, and he saw many people die, and some of them, unfortunately, including his best friend, who was in a car accident 25 years ago, died suddenly. And you see what it means to have young people with their family, and you don't plan for that. So he was actually, I didn't really ever ask him how to use my money or do whatever, but he was insistent that I get life insurance because he saw what it means for somebody who is young, so young wife, kids, or and not to have life insurance. So Meir Shapiro, anyone heard of Meir Shapiro? Right, the founder of the Daf Yomi. Meir Shapiro had no children, okay? But he had a very, very large life insurance policy. Why? Because the yeshiva that he founded was called Chachmei Lublin, which he built with his own hard work, grit, determination. It was the largest yeshiva in Poland. He was the fundraiser for it. The yeshiva was funded based on the charisma of Meir Shapiro, based on his being dynamic. And actually, Meir Shapiro was not only the founder of Daf Yomi, not only the founder of this big yeshiva, he was in the Polish parliament. And he was a wonder man. He actually died very young, relatively. I remember my grandmother, my Bobby told me she was in Poland in 1935 when he passed away, and she said Poland went into depression. Right? Absolutely, in 1933, because when he passed away, it was so saddened. It was right after Chavetz Chaim had passed away. But Meir Shapiro bought a large life insurance policy. Why? Because he felt an obligation to the yeshiva. And he put the yeshiva as the recipient of this life insurance policy. So Rabbi Moshe is asked him, why should you, where's your faith? Insurance is, something's going to go wrong. If somebody lives to 90 years old, you don't need life insurance, right? It's not going to really pay too much either, right? So where is the faith? The Chavetz Chaim was asked. So the Rabbi Moshe was asked, and Rabbi Yosef were asked, and what they both said is it's not a lack of faith, but it's actually they held that God empowered us to make rightful decisions, to make smart decisions, and to, just like you plan ahead and everything else, this is considered wise planning. And Moshe held, it was Mentor Yaakov Kamenetsky. I saw that Rav Vosner was one of the greatest sages of Israel, said that life insurance comes before Meiser. Why does it come before tithing? Because it's a basic necessity. It's a basic necessity. Sometimes you see these people die young, mothers or fathers. You can these communications get these stuck. All these people didn't have life insurance. It wouldn't be the case if they had life insurance. One doesn't know, and I can again just reiterate. My father told me, you see if a family person passes away without life insurance, it has tremendous negative things on the family. It's considered basic seichel to do, especially if one's younger. They can get into a policy for relatively cheap. I'm telling you, when I was younger, I didn't think on these terms at all. But when you run a paramedic company, you see what happens. I just by chance, I bumped into a guy. His name's Albert Kahn in New York. He's a real estate person, but one of his major things is to make sure that all the Rebbeim have life insurance policies in New York. And all the people, I just told me, I saw him when I was in New York last week. He said to me, he just got a call from the head of a large coal in Borough Park, who said, thank you very much. You pushed me to get the whole coal life insurance. There's a person in his 20s, late 20s, who just got sick and died suddenly. And his family would have been completely left with nothing. But the fact that he'd offered $200, I think a year, it's like a basic life insurance. His family has a lot more support than they would have had. Actually, I will say my father, one thing he had regret, and this is something one should think about as well. If you're the breadwinner of the family, he actually told me this when he got sick, that he was upset. He is a successful business person, but he told me he had charata, disability insurance. Again, this is just chacham and avan. If you are the breadwinner of your family, disability insurance is something to ponder. I think life insurance everyone should have, and disability insurance one should think about. If people have incapacitating illnesses, sickness, so much of these things, it's just like what happens, it's not crazy. You look at the world, if you are in a situation where you're dependent on one income and you don't have a lot in the bank, right, that question is something that should really, for many people, they should strongly consider disability insurance. That's just basic, ideas of pre-thinking of insurance. With life insurance, obviously there are many options. My role today is not to discuss, whole life, which I don't think is a good idea for most, versus term versus 30, or many people think is good. That you should speak to somebody who's well qualified in that. Talking about health. Usually this year I push for people to get what we call a Halachic living will or a healthcare proxy. And I have been in court more than once. I've dealt with commissions more than once with the following scene. You have a person who does not have a health proxy, does not have such a document, and the hospital who does not care about you. Let me just be very frank. I once spoke to the owner of a hospital, a private owner, a very wealthy individual, and I was talking about how they make money. He told me 90% of the money is the first 3 to 4 days the person's in the hospital. Afterwards, they start to lose money actually on patients. Right? They have a vested interest. Right? The cost for many illnesses will drain their resources. The government will limit the amount of money they can get per patient. Okay, So the first day or two, it's all lishma for them. They get the money and they're happy to be there. There's a certain point where they don't want people in the hospital because they lose money. We are all biased when we lose money. The hospitals are no different. They don't even know who we are. Okay, I'm not saying that every hospital is looking to kill people, but if anything is a close call on their part, they will look to do things which may not be your will. And a halachic living will is a protection for that. I had one case, actually, just to talk about a double whammy. I didn't even know the person, but another rabbi asked me to get involved in this from the Bay Area, and it was a brother and a sister. This is a brother and a sister. The sister was completely secular. The brother was almost completely secular, but the brother wanted the father to stay alive. Father was semi-conscious. Whenever the brother would go in there, he would shake his hand, smile at him, but he was in a situation so he knew the son was coming into the room, and he was on life support in Stanford, and the sister had power of attorney. There was no health proxy, so the father never said what he wanted. So the sister said, "No more care." The brother wanted care, and so they can't. If he was considered a living, they can't do anything. But between the hospital and the sister, who had power of attorney, the sister wasn't even around. The brother ultimately, semi-won, semi-lost, because I think we actually helped. But I can tell you, I remember Stanford Hospital was in the room arguing. I'm listening to these people argue. We care about the patient. We can't watch him suffer. We need to stop giving him care. We care about him. I would have loved to cross-examine them. Like, lady, have you even seen this patient? What do you mean you care about him? Right? Every time he sees his son, he smiles and shakes his hand. Right? This topic. If you don't have protection, you are at the will of people who don't care about halacha. And a health proxy is a legal document, which in a sense, I just want to say one thing. There's a misnomer. We keep people alive under all circumstances. Not necessarily true. We view life as paramount. But there are certain circumstances where we don't, force extraordinary measures to give life. That's for sure the case. Certainly, if people are in a fatal situation, to do extra care. I really don't want to get the details because whatever I say, I'm worried will be misapplied. Suffice it to say, you need expertise in Jewish law. You need expertise in medical care. But if you have a healthcare proxy, you empower an agent you can trust. An agent you can trust, and B, that it has to be done according to Jewish law, according to Orthodox Jewish law. So, number one is you need an agent you can trust. About a year and a half ago, this is going to stay in my mind always. There's a lady, she's a member of Temple Emmanuel, who I happen to have a connection with. They asked me to go say Vidur. I knew this lady. I had actually had her in my house the previous Sukkos. She was, her children, she had no biological children. She had a stepchild she adopted through marriage, who was going to inherit everything that she left over, and that was a lot. And I walked into the room. I had a normal conversation with this lady. I'm telling you, normal. I said to her, "So-and-so, do you want to come again for Sukkot?" She nods her head. She understands everything I'm saying. Like, literally every word I am saying. She would happen to be in a degree of pain. There's no question about that. But I had a completely normal conversation with her. And not like she was completely lucid. And it was clear to me that within a very short period, they were about to pull, the machines would die, she was going to die with it. I mean, I left the hospital as soon as possible because as far as Jewish law is concerned, that's murder, right? So that this lady, the last thing in her life is, as far as Jewish law is concerned, her stepdaughter took a gun to her head and shot her, or starved her, okay, or suffocated her, right? If you would see somebody, you choke them to death, right? That's the ethics of a lot of the American system. They don't have an ethics of life is paramount value. It's quality of life, right? So if you're someone sick, and obviously there's certain countries in Europe have a very low bar about this, or you're somewhat depressed, then life isn't worth living, as opposed to us where life is always valuable. They don't have an ethics which says, murder is murder. I still, of course, you can't physically kill a person, but you can certainly withhold stuff. You can starve a person to death. Literally, you can starve a person to death. You could take off all oxygen supplies. Again, there are times where, I don't want to get to the level, but you need, if you care about Jewish law, and the last thing you want to make sure to do in this world is God's desire. And the last thing you want to do to this world, not to make your children murderers or grandchildren murderers. So one should make sure that this is taken care of. That there's a healthcare proxy with an executor. You don't need visionaries. Let me give you an example. There are times. Actually, I wrote this down. Like Rabbi Moshe says as follows: if a person's in a terminal condition, this patient is in unbearable pain and suffering, they need painful invasive treatments or serious chemotherapy to stay alive. If the patient chooses under those circumstances, they don't have to take the treatment. Okay, painful, terminal, and extraordinary care. Under many of those circumstances, you're not obligated to be treated. If you want to be treated, you're obligated. So what happens is Moshe says, let's say the patient is non-responsive. So what should you do then? So he says the child is obligated to do what the parent would have wanted. The parent expressed a will, right? That, usually people will go from 0 to serious chemotherapy, what they would like to be done to them. You don't follow what you want. You need to follow what the parent wants, right? And so if a child doesn't have those kind of viewpoints, you have to be careful that this child is able to do exactly that. Okay, you need an executor. All wills need somebody. They don't need visionaries for wills. It's a real life will or a health proxy. You need an executor. A person who's going to do what you want, not what they want, right? Imagine you say, I like my house to go here, and the person who executes the will gives it to somebody else. Is that what you want? Right? So you're getting a will, you need someone who can execute the will, and that includes a halachic proxy. You could take a halachic proxy. I know Kevin has done this many others. The OU has a database. It's a national database. I would suggest if you do the halachic will, which is a legal document, a living will, you put it on the OU database that you can pull down on any hospital. You don't need to. It's there for anyone to access. There are cards. If anyone needs these cards, you can put them in your wallet, which are legally binding cards that have this. I would also suggest never to get a DNR. What's a DNR, Nachum? Do not resuscitate. As a general rule, because if you have a halachic will, you can play it by ear. But if you have a DNR, typically the care of a hospital will be much lower because the liability for the hospital is much less. Right? You have expressed less of an interest in your life. They will have less of an interest in your life. Right? If you sign a DNR, you're putting yourself at somewhat risk. It doesn't mean you always have to resuscitate. But if you say DNR no matter what, I'll tell you a real life story somebody you all know. Ben Simon, the last, maybe it's about 3 years before he died, he was always in and out of hospitals. He had been sick the last several years of his life. And some lady said to him, do you want to sign this paper? He didn't really understand what he was signing. When I sign, we'll put you in something called that's a form of hospice care. There'll be a DNR, and that we won't do anything. The way she described, the way I understand it, we won't do anything crazy to you if you're very sick. We won't do anything crazy to you. Now, many of us, I'm saying crazy, because we won't really push you to stay alive. So he signed the paper. Meanwhile, he has a minor heart attack. They bring him into the hospital, and he has a DNR signed. And Victoria's there, and they're not treating him. She said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "He signed this." And she screams her head off, like, "What?" The whole, that's the, you know what he was signing. She's screaming, "I'm going to sue you! I'm going to, this is a true story, you can ask her, right?" And Yeah, they're like, I'm his wife. I'm the power of attorney. He has no idea. You didn't have dot. She didn't say dot. She didn't have the knowledge. You tricked him. There's no way he would have wanted this. So that ended up treating him. And within 36 hours, I was in the room with the Simons at the time and 2 social workers from this is in Kaiser. And the social worker said, she says to me, I asked you if you want to sign this, and you said yes. So I said to Ben, I said, actually there's another, I don't remember Geraldine, her first friend Geraldine, like she's calling them, you guys are murderers! She's screaming, she's in the room also, you guys are a bunch of murderers here, you just wanted to kill him. So I said, let me ask you a question, Ben. Ben, if you've signed this paper, I want you to understand this. If anything happens to even, if a heart attack, they're not going to treat you really, necessarily. Do you want to see your daughter is pregnant? This is Corinne's first baby. Do you want to see your grandchild when your grandchild's born? He says yes. So I said, do you realize if you sign this, you may not see your grandchild? And they disregarded. He obviously didn't want to do that. Disregarded. He lived for 3 more years. So that not only was that grandson, did we see the Sandik, we see the Godfather on his lap, but he saw another grandchild. David got married in Israel. He watched the wedding. He saw 3 more years of life, but they would have been lost. Literally, Victoria didn't scream her head off in the hospital, right? That DNR would have killed him. So I strongly suggest don't sign that, right? Because you will endanger yourself. Again, there are times where you don't resuscitate, but don't make it into some kind of blanket rule under all cases and all circumstances, right? What you do need is everyone needs to have an agent who you trust, who cares about you, not about your will, because there are people who have a vested interest in you passing away. I've seen this, okay? I'm unbiased in this, who don't care about you. If anything comes to throw, if they stand to benefit from something, they will make the wrong decision. There are people who are who are mean well, who honestly mean well, who are good people, but their Weltanschauung, their worldview is one of, if they can't play golf, they can't go skiing or sailing, then life it has no value. And if they can't imagine that for themselves, they don't want that for you. And we generally have a very different viewpoint of the world, right? So it's important that this is done. Another thing that one should strongly consider doing is HIPAA. I've had this, unfortunately, as well. HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, will block almost everyone from getting information, everyone meaning family members, close family members, getting health information from doctors unless a patient has signed a release. So if you have people you expect to take care of you, or if you have a parent who is getting elderly and you want to make sure you can take proper care of them, make sure they sign a release that all of the information, right? Let's say one person has a power of attorney. They're only going to give it the information to the person it is. If you have 6 children and the other 5 children came and called a doctor, and get really information. When I was in New York just now, my brother-in-law was at my mother-in-law's for Shabbos. His wife went to labor, drove from Brooklyn back to Lakewood, and had a baby that Saturday. So they called up Saturday night. They called the hospital. Moshe Zakheim could we find that he had a baby? What the baby was? We can't tell you. Call her. I'm his mother. I'm not telling you. My mother thought she could sweet talk him. Come on, please. He loves me. Lady, I can't help you. And then the truth is, they're doing their job, right? They're not going to tell you. So if you want to make sure that the people who need to make decisions, these times are so stressful, right? It's so stressful, and making life and death decisions or telling relatives when they should come in for a funeral or when they should say goodbye to mom or dad, when a child who's very critically sick, when somebody should know about this. You can't make. If I have to make a decision, I want first-hand information. I'm going to play telephone with the doctor. If I can't speak to a doctor, I get questions about Yom Kippur sometimes, like just small questions. I said, let me speak to the doctor. You're going to tell me telephone what the doctor says, which is so case detail-oriented. So if you have, either for yourself or other people, realize that HIPAA will block information. you should have a release form for the people you want that information given to, okay? And you can't scream at the doctors because they're just going to do their job. They're not going to go to jail for you, right? They're going to say, I can't tell you. You're going to be, I'm a son, I'm a daughter. It's my son or daughter. Well, if your son or daughter is 35 years old, okay, they're not going to give the information as a general rule. It doesn't make a difference. So you need something called a HIPAA release form. Also, as far as especially if you have health conditions, but in general, everyone should have in their wallet, their phone, dumb phone or smartphone, ICE information in case of emergency. Who are your emergency contacts, right? That's something that should be simple. Then everybody's phone, there should be, because actually paramedics are trained, first thing they find somebody in the wallet or on the phone to look for ICE in case of emergency information. This needs a little bit of thought, right? One of my parents are much more calmer than the other. Who would I want to be getting that phone call? Not God forbid me or anyone else, but who is the person who has the ability to handle the situation? There are people who, if their kid gets a scrape, have a nervous breakdown. They're not the good person to deal with that, but they may be the only person. All of these things that we're going forward right now needs thought. You have to be, as I started at the beginning, chacham v'navan, wise and discerning. If you have a decision like this, who would be the first person to take the call in case of emergency? If you have an elderly relative, they should certainly make sure they have ICE information on them wherever they are. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten calls that their parent or grandparent is missing, right? And they start calling hospitals to find where they are. It means they have no idea where they are. And you know what? The hospital has no idea who this person's relative is. What happens if an 85-year-old lady falls down and they don't know what are they going to do? If she fell down the street in the park somewhere, how do they know where she is? How do they know? They're going to bring her in and treat her, but they don't know who the family is. They're not investigative units, right? And very often elderly people don't carry something. Teenagers will not carry things around them usually, right? And they can walk in the street and things happen, right? So it's important to have on your phone, right? On your phone or in your wallet, ICE information, okay? Next major topic I want to talk about is estate planning. And and again, I started with Professor Mann and the Dear Ann and Dear Abby. This area, the damage that this could do, if not done correctly, is lifetime. You can build a family in your life and destroy it with your death. You can build a harmonious family and destroy it with your death. You could destroy your legacy. You can destroy your family business, and you can destroy your family if not done correctly. Right? To say the least, in all of this, you need a wise and discerning attorney. Jack, are you a wise and discerning attorney? Sometimes. You get Jackie in the back. You get it on the right days. Because really, I'm sure Jack, if you have any questions afterwards, he is a wise and discerning attorney. If things are done incorrect, as I mentioned, all of those cases, Dear Ann and Dear Abby, these family fights, many of them had attorneys, but they didn't think through the issues. Right? And sometimes it's not the attorney's fault. You know whose fault it is? The people coming to them. An attorney can't help you if you don't help yourself. They don't know your family dynamics. We need to think through these areas. This is the hardest thing, and I'm going to get to some of the topics. First of all, without a will, the state will decide what happens to you. So, right, every state has intestate rules. Right? If you don't decide, somebody else is going to decide what happens to you, which will be against Jewish law. Jewish law, we will have, for most of us, have documents to keep Jewish law. Actually, I did this with Sam and with other people over the past few years. To keep Jewish law and to do what, so technically the wife is a creditor in Jewish law and she's not a recipient of the estate. She has a first lien on the estate. Lots of laws of firstborn gets twice the amount, how boys get, how girls get. Well, if we do it, we can do it correctly to do our will judiciously. If the state does it, they will completely abrogate anything of Jewish law. In fact, you may have considerations for your children. One kid is sicker, one kid is, state's not going to say this son makes $3 million a year and this son makes $50,000 a year. They're going to split the state based on what they want to do, right? And they're not going to take into any of your family dynamics. It's an uncaring, unscientific method to split up your estate. They're not going to take into account, this child spoke to you every day and helped you, and the other child hated your guts, right? Unless there's some, as a general rule, they're going to just split your money. So you want to make sure, first of all, the Torah law is taken into consideration. When you do a will, every aspect has to be with tremendous thoughts. There's a saying, Ezuhu hachacham haroes anolad. Who is the wise person who sees the future? It doesn't mean something you can't know. It means something you could know. You just need to think it through. What happens if you do so and so? We just read the part about Joseph and his brothers. Kids will be jealous, right? And a will should be thought out how it will affect the family, right? There's tough decisions to be made, right? If there's a business and one kid has business sense and the other doesn't, what are you going to do? You need to think about this, right? If there's a business, right, you need to think about who could run the business correctly, and if you give the business, how are you going to compensate for the other kids? All of this, an attorney's not going to know this. He'll ask you good questions, but we need to think about this, right? If one thing is getting more things, as a general rule, let's say you have 3 kids and you put them all into business together, you may be setting them up for failure. I'm giving them the exact same thing, but guess what? Your son is brilliant. He went to Penn for business. How much more brilliant can the guy be? He's a good business person. But you make the kids work together. You say all 3. And your other son is a moron. He spends all his money in Las Vegas. He can care less about anything which is valuable. So you're going to put those 2, you set them up as business partners. What are you setting them up for? Failure, right? You're setting them up for failure very often. So, again, I'm not saying that you can't do that, but you got to think through these things. This is your legacy, right? The way you write in the will, you need to think through 150 years now, permutations. What could happen? What makes sense? Right? This is not a small thing. If you're a kid with special needs, you better think that through very carefully what that child is going to need. Who it is. The next part of the will is the hardest part. And if you ever do this, if you have young children, who gets custody? You know what that is? By the way, if you're young and you've not written a will, custody will not be up to you necessarily. I mean, this is serious stuff. Talk about damaging children for life, right? If it's not there, who's going to decide it? The courts. That's right. And the courts don't know that your mother-in-law or mother are not proper for kids. They may be a successful business lady, but they're not a good mother, right? They don't have time for the grandchildren, right? These are. I once had somebody from this show about 7 or 8 years ago. The kids are a little bit older now. Came to me, writing a will back and forth. Every time I think about one kid, where to give them, they couldn't figure out what to do. You know what? I give that person credit. They took it very seriously. It wasn't annoying to me. This is real life. God forbid this happens. You got to think through, right? This kid needs a lot of TLC. Who could give that kid TLC? Right? This kid needs to go to certain schools. Where would they be in the certain schools if that would happen? You need to be thought out. What would make sense? God forbid, anything ever happens, what's the best for this child? Right? Wills are challenging in this. You have specific jewelry. If you don't say what this jewelry is, you have a jewelry box. Right? Who's getting it? And how's it going? Who is it meaningful to? Right? These things need to be thought out. You have an heirloom in your family. Who should you think about giving this to? Charity. It's a remarkable thing. Jews are the most charitable people in the world. Right? We are the most charitable. It's in our DNA, our spiritual DNA. It's in our upbringing to be charitable. I'm not saying just for Jewish causes. For secular Jews will give to all kinds of causes. I think for years the American Red Cross was over 50%. The donations were coming for Jews, hospitals, universities, political campaigns, better, good, right? Right? People were very charitable people. But we have laws, and that means as a general rule we give 10%, and one's as a general rule not allowed to give more than 20%. Okay, but on one's death they can give considerably more. Some say up to 50%. Some say in theory you could even give your whole estate, but it's not practical. So we also have laws of inheritance. So one should do both. I want to just explain something to you. Again, if you have a very modest estate, the reason people leave to their children, I'm not talking about is to give. It's first they work. It's an incentive for them to give to their children. But our children or our grandchildren or our nephews and nieces or our we're investing in them, right? When you leave over for somebody, you are giving them the ability to carry on and do great things in this world. So if you have a close relative, you would like to empower them to be the most that they can be in this world, right? So, but remember one thing, after we die, we're on our own. So it could be if your children do well, you know who else does well? You do well. If your grandchildren do well, you do well. If you have a nephew or niece who you love and they're great people, and they do well, and you empower them, you're doing well. But the best way you can do well is things you did yourself, not other people. And charity, after a person dies, right, is one of the most important things a person could do. So if you have a large estate, I have the following, it always bothers me. A person has a $50 million estate. I don't know if anyone has that. If you do, please speak to me as soon as possible. Right? If anyone has that, do you think you have 2 kids, they each need $25 million, what are they going to do with that? What are they going to do with that? Very often it's not going to be good for them, quite frankly. You should give a large amount to charity, right? That's your legacy. If you give that over, that will be for you invest in it. That's with you in Shemayim. We have laws of inheritance reason. Surely give everything to charity. I think that's when I saw someone who's signing 99% of their wealth to charity. I thought it was obscene. Right? I would certainly, but up to 50% is certainly a Jewish idea. Now, if it's a very modest estate and your children need it, or grandchildren, or a person's a young person or sick, and they have parents who need it, whatever it may be, I'm not talking about that. But everyone should leave something for charity in the law. Everybody should. This is your last, it will be the last deed of your life. Afterwards, when your child gives charity in your memory, who's giving the charity? They are. It's not up to you. And you know what? Some children do it and some do not. I can't tell you how depressing it is to me when I say to a person, you're coming to say Kash for your mother tomorrow morning. No. Well, that's too early for me. I have no mercy to such people. I say, too early? Your mother woke up in 3. Actually, my daughter Echad right now is in New York, right? She has the flu. She's calling my house middle of the night. Like, my wife is so nice. I'm like, tell her to call in the morning. Like 3 in the morning she's calling. She's with my daughter. I'm joking around, but she's almost 16. Your mother woke up for you left and right. And you can't wake up to say Kaddish, you're a bum. I said it a little bit nicer, not much nicer, but you're a bum. You don't wake up to say Kaddish for your mother. You ask somebody else, you ask Menashe or Howard to say Kaddish. You could be waking. So I'm telling you, the reality is people don't give as much. When they get the money in their hands, it's their money. They'll do what they want. Some of them will give a decent enough for their parent, and many will not. If it is a Jewish practice to leave over in every will tzedakah. If you benefited from a place, you surely hakara satayv. If you believe in something, you're investing. The Orach Chaim, I always see this. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh is one of the great commentaries on Chumash, and in the beginning of his commentary, he thanks the 6 people who donated for his commentary to be published. That was about 350 years ago. Though that commentary is studied weekly by tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, those 6 people are still getting rewards. This room, I always say, this synagogue, there are people who died 20 years ago and 30 years ago, but we pray in here every day, and every day they get a merit. Every day they get a merit because they invest in the synagogue. Right? Every class, I don't know what the stock percentage is, God's worth of God. This place is because of people's time, energy, money, right? So if you gave money, it doesn't disappear over time. It's an investment in the future. Charity should certainly be part. I've told people who don't have kids to say Kash for them. You should have in the will the money set aside for, or you can name the organization, even better, that they should say Kash for you for the year. Also, just with this idea of wills, very often some people, and this is again, you can speak to an attorney about it, will have something called a revocable living trust, which will allow you and your loved ones to make financial decisions for you with your finances if you lose mental capacity and if you lose the ability to make those decisions. So let's say a person has, their spouse predeceases them, they have an estate, but they now have dementia. So how are you gonna access that, right? Or how are people make decisions? Let's say the children or relatives who have it don't have the money. I've had a few cases where it's a cousin making these decisions, and they themselves are not wealthy, but the person has a large estate. Those are situations where something called a revocable living trust. Okay, I'm not going to get. I'm just going to speak to your personal attorney about. Also, like that, a person should have a durable power of attorney, which allows like IRAs, 401ks, filing income taxes, right? Have someone file income taxes for a person who is making money in the stock market, and no one's there to make the decisions for them, right? Right. So you'd also, both of those are important instruments to have. If you have yourself or relatives, they have estates, they have to make the decisions. When they lose seichel, you're stuck, right? If they lose their ability to think, you're stuck to a large extent. So things like a durable power of attorney, a revocable living trust. I can tell you that very, very often I get people, because again, I get it as a rabbi, I get it because my background is law, and I also get it because of the Charitable Kadisha. So I get calls all the time. How many people are making poor decisions because the people making the decisions don't have access to the money. And so everything is like, I don't have the money for this, or what should I do? The money's locked up or tied up, So who suffers? I want to know who suffers. The person who didn't do it. They don't have this revocable living trust or durable power of attorney. The people who actually care about them and love them are blocked to an extent. Sometimes, I'm just saying generalities. This is just seichel, chacham v'navon, wise and discerning, planning ahead to make sure that the person can get the best care, that their assets are managed. Imagine you have somebody who worked for 65 years on a business, and he loses his ability to make decisions, and the people who could help protect his assets can't do that, right? And sometimes it's a stroke that happens to the person, and it's too late, right? Yesterday they were walking the street, and today they had a stroke. They can't make it wasn't planned, right? And this person has a multi-pronged business, or a house, or an estate, or a lot of other things, and the people can't access it. Or they invested in a company, whatever this company is, it's in Venezuela, and right now you gotta sell, and you can't sell, the money's locked, right? It's locked. So these instruments allow people to help themselves, right? You create a durable power of attorney. You allow your loved ones to make the decision. Now, Michelle, your son's getting married in 3 weeks, right? Could Josh decide what's going on with your estate today? No. Right. No. Why? He's getting married. He's a young adult. He's an up-and-coming wine company. Why can't he decide for you?
Well, we named Rachel for the...
She can't decide for you today either, could she?
As soon as we get something signed, she will be able to.
Right, okay, but if you don't do that, what would happen?
No, then I don't know.
Right? Actually, my father, one of the reasons I thought about trust in the States, my father has a very large CPA firm in Florida. And one of the things he does, Florida is a haven for winter. People move there from the Northeast and Canada and the Midwest to retire. So it has great estate. There's no estate tax. Estate tax. Tax rates are great. So there's huge people of small business, middle business. He has lots of people like that. I remember my father had a client. The person started to lose his seichel. He was going into banks and ATMs, taking money and just giving it to people. Do you understand? This was his client, right? His guy is in his late 70s, just whatever it is, was going into banks. He was worth several $1 million, was going into banks, taking cash. I said, well, where is he going? Tell me where he's going next. I'll meet him there, right? But it's not, no joke. You know what the problem was? No one could stop him. He had to get my father, because this guy had no one really watching him. So he had, look at it this way, My father said he had nobody, he had no power of attorney for anybody. He had no children. Okay? He had no one in charge of him. My father had to get a court order to show this person was mentally incapacitated so they could stop him from doing this. But my father couldn't stop him. The guy's 77 years old. How is he going to stop the guy? Right? The guy was going into banks, just giving out money. I don't even know how he found my father. My father was his CPA. It wasn't even his attorney. But my father went, he obviously deals with attorneys all the time. He got a court order to show this guy is mentally incapacitated, to stop him. Because no one else could. Okay? I'm just showing these are things, anyone whose parents are over 75 or 80, or we ourselves are getting older, these are things you got to think about. Ethical. I mentioned on Shabbos that Jacob, in his last day of his life, and you see this thing by Moshe, you see it by King David, you see it by many others, they give their children an ethical will. I'm not talking about doing Torah mitzvahs today, because that's for every day, but an ethical will, if you have a vision for your family, an ethical will is certainly, to us, the passing of generations. It could be to nieces, nephews, cousins, fellow congregants. It's an important thing to do ahead of time, right? The Shlomo Kluger, who is one of the greatest sages, is the Rav of Brody. He was an orphan. He was raised actually by the Maggid Midubna. And from the age that his father passed away, every year he would write an ethical will. And it would change over time. Actually, we have many of his ethical wills. But he put tremendous thought what he wanted to tell his children. What was important to him. What is the legacy? What do I hope for you? What do I expect for you? I only mention this because, not everyone has a chance on their deathbed to tell over to their children. Sometimes you don't know what it's going to be. You lose your ability to think. Right? An ethical will is the last bequest you can give to your children or grandchildren or relatives or friends, but it takes you to plan this ahead of time. You don't know what it's going to be. When a person is sick, they can't necessarily think about this. Next topic, burial arrangements. Woo. Just today, the past 24 hours, I had a case of somebody who wanted to get cremated, the grandparent. Why do they want to get cremated? For financial reasons. They have no money. Now, I'm not going to go into cremation now. As everyone knows, about a year and a half ago, the Charitable Kadisha brought a big corn booth to speak about cremation. I've mentioned over the years as well. But cremation is the worst possible thing that could happen to a dead person, and I can't think of too many things that a living person could do. Cremation is the opposite of Judaism. It blocks a person from being resurrected from the dead. You do not do a tahara on a cremated person, according to most opinions. You do not say kaddish for a person who's cremated. You do not say shit shiva for a person who's cremated. Cremation is the antithesis of all that's Jewish. Okay? And anyone who wants any material, the Charitable website has it. I'm happy to give anyone the cremation. Anyone you know is going to be cremated, you should do anything and everything that you could to stop that from happening. Cremation is such, and today, Howard was there, we went to San Francisco, Rabbi Menachem came, we had San Francisco, San Jose and Palo Alto, we had him speak, and and obviously it was the papers as well afterwards, but in San Francisco there was a Chinese group that was there, right outside, they said, as we're having a talk on cremation, they said, ooh, could we come? So I was surprised. He said, what's against cremation? Oh, we don't want to come. All these Chinese people got cremated. They thought we were talking about good cremation tactics. Right? So we live in a culture where a lot of people are cremated. And if you're not observant and you're not traditional, there's a cost incentive towards cremation. So I'm not about cremation, but one thing I want to say is that this family were able to make serious arrangements for burial, and I'm actually helping them to an extent to get the money for the burial, but I only know how this is happening because they have the time and the preparation ahead of time. If the person would have died and they had no preparation, I don't know what had happened. The person could have been cremated. You know why? Because they've been discussing with the mortuary for several days already about the cost. The person's in hospice. Of the cost of burial. So they built their own coffin, this family. They built their own coffin. Okay? Because they know how to build a coffin. But my point is, The reason that this grandma is going to be buried is because of advanced preparation. If it would have been sudden death, I don't know what would have happened. They may have wanted to get buried. It would have been a whole. But the burial preparation, this situation, it's only actually a couple of weeks. So the person is only going to live most likely for a short period longer, But it's the reason there's going to be a good ending here, Be'ez Hashem, is because in these last couple of weeks they've made every effort to make sure that the grandparent is buried. If the grandparent would have suddenly died and there'd be no preparation for burial, I shudder to think what could have possibly happened. And I say this because cremation is the worst. The worst. The more knowledge of this, if you can tell a person, if you have relatives and they're going to be cremated, it's worse than going to a guy and blowing his head off. Literally, of course, compared to, it is the worst thing. You can't even say Kaddish, Torah, Shiva, nothing. And people live in cultures today where it's totally normal as a financial. So, and also autopsies, by the way, as a general rule, the Torah holds kedusha of the body. You need to make sure that in your will or for anything else is autopsy. Actually, there are certain cases where autopsies are allowed, but those are very rare. Okay, so as I mentioned, just this case the past week I'm dealing with, burial decisions are super duper important. I'm going to say something which is very important. The Sfarim bring down to actually buy a plot is a skula, is auspicious for long life. You know why the Sfarim bring this down? Because the Yetzer Hara gains by bahala, confusion, fighting, anger. And if you bought any preparation for death, as I said, is always a win, right? Everything we're talking about today, if we're careful about our insurances, about our healthcare policies, about our wills, ethical wills, the Yetzer Hara's. But you know what happens when there's no preparation? Chaos, pandemonium, fighting, tension. I've been in the ER, your families screaming their heads off at each other. Wills being read and people are crying, not out of happiness that they got to them because they're so upset, right? People don't know what their father would have won with the business. People don't know what their mother would have wanted with the kids, where the kids are going and cut. All these things that happen if they're not prepared are tragic and very often dangerous and destructive. Or the Yetzer Hara, if you have everything prepared ahead of time, there's very little room for. There's pain of loss, but there's not the fighting. There's not the tension. It's decided already. And so burying a burial plot is considered actually an auspicious thing to do during life. I will say that I honestly believe as a general rule, a person should delay this until they're very clear where they're going in this world. I'm going to give you an example. When I remember when Emma Al-Jas was told about her final sickness, the lady was unbelievable. I can't describe the depth of character of her. Imagine getting that news and your life is limited. So I was called into the house. And one of the things I said to them is, actually I'm going to backtrack. I think I can say this. Just about ethical will. I had this conversation with her, and she asked Eve to leave. So I'm telling you, she asked Eve to leave. This was about 3 months before she passed away. So Eve leaves the room. She told me that I should tell him after she passes away that he should get remarried. Right? This is what she tells me. She used to get remarried. And about 2 days before she died, I was in the hospital with her. She told me that again, please tell him to get remarried. I want you to know that about literally a year later, they did it within a few months after he was married, but what empowered him to do this is what she said. And that's an ethical will. Understand that? That's somebody who's dying, she's thinking about her husband. Her saying that empowered him. That just shows you how important it is to have an ethical will, right? It allowed him to not feel guilty. To not feel like, what am I doing? By living, by going through life and living. That's to her tremendous credit. But one of the things that happened that day was I said to her, where would you like to be buried? And I'm going to tell you what they told me at first. I blocked them. I said, you can't, I said, you're going to be buried here. Well, who's here? Who's going to visit you? think through. Let's go through it. If you're buried in the Bay Area, Eve was not planning to get. Eve didn't even know she said to get married. He thought he'd be living here, right? Well, who's going to visit you here? If you have a daughter in Chicago, she's there. You have a daughter in Israel. Is she planning to stay there? Is your daughter in Chicago planning to stay there? Right? Think carefully. I know many people who buy a burial plot and they change jobs, change locations. Their kids move somewhere. They want to make aliyah. You name it. So buying a burial plot, really, it's very hard. It's not like there's a huge market for buying used, I know somebody from the Temple Sinai down the block just told me, recently told me, that they have plots in Los Gatos. They would like to sell it because they have a child on the East Coast. They want to be buried near that child. They bought these plots probably 20 years ago, right? But now they want to change their mind. So this is also, where do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself going with this? You have to think about this ahead of time. If you have a parent, they want to be buried next to someone, well, is mommy alive? Is daddy alive? What happens when they pass away? Who's going to be there, right? So here's the case. You have a father and mother that are living in Cincinnati, Ohio. In Cincinnati, Ohio. They have no children living in Cincinnati, Ohio, right? The children are all living in Miami and Atlanta, okay? But one parent is going to be alive afterwards, most likely. They may want to see the cave, but what happens after that? I'm not telling you what the answer is. I'm just telling you these things need to be thought out, right? These things have to be thought out. One of the questions that we often get was, what about Israel? This week's past week's parsha, where did Jacob want to be buried? Why do you want to be buried in Israel? Several reasons, but one reason is because he didn't want to be made into an idolatry. One of the reasons is because lice would happen in Egypt, right? But the main reason it's given is that the resurrection of the dead will happen in Israel. He didn't have to go under there. There is the Sfarim and the Gemara says that Ulah, for example, and Gemara says that Ulah was died in Chutz La'aretz, and he asked to be buried in the land of Israel. He wanted his body to be taken to Israel. As far as atonement, getting the resurrection of the dead, the works of Kabbalah say that dying in the land of Israel is very auspicious for the soul. Right? It's a tremendously auspicious for resurrection of the dead, for atonement, for closeness. Eventually, all the Jewish people are going to live in Israel. So, right, there's lots of spiritual reasons to want to be buried in Israel. Some say if you did not live in Israel and you weren't particularly righteous, you should not be buried in Israel. That's an opinion of some of the Kabbalists. But also, this is very important. I mentioned this Saturday about my experience going to my grandparents' kever, who were buried in Mount Lebanon Cemetery in New Jersey. So my mother's mother was buried in Israel because her whole life she wanted to live in Israel, and she put in her will to be buried in Israel. I'll tell you, actually, I had a relative who didn't want her to be buried there, and I said, no way. It's not my parents. No way. She wanted it in her will, and that's what she's going to get. And that's what happened. But I'm still just pointing out that you have to be very careful at this. You have other people who meet, and they meant well, by the way. They went to visit the person more, right? Well, one of the things is the idea to visit your parents' relatives to be there. The Sefer Hasidim, which is not nothing to do with the Hasidic movement. It's the Sefer Hasidim, which is Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid in the 12th century. It's one of the great German Rishonim. So the Sefer Hasidim says that it's beneficial to the deceased when their family prays at their grave for their merits, and then they pray you pray to God, but we always pray to God. But it's beneficial for the deceased, and if you go to visit them, they pray for you. You visit your parents, you visit your grandparents, you visit your relatives, and you pray at their grave, they will pray for you. It's benefit for them, it's a benefit for you. I'm telling you, I took my son Yosef Meir to Yosef Meir, his namesake. I took my daughter Sima to her great-great-grandmother, who she's named after. It affects you. And you know who else affects? It affects them. So there's a plus about being buried in an area where people can visit you. It's known that certain great Rosh Yeshuvas, Rebbe's, were specifically asked to be buried in America because they wanted their Hasidim, They wanted their Talmidim to be inspired. They wanted their family to be able to visit them. Right? That's a serious calculation that your family and friends should be able to visit you. Rav Henkin didn't like it because he felt that you're setting up people for expectations. If people start getting buried in Israel, everyone's going to have to do it. It's very expensive. Actually, my cousin told me, my cousin is married to Rabbi Avigdor Miller's granddaughter. So I said to him, it's amazing. Rabbi Avigdor Miller was buried in Israel, right? He never visited Israel his whole life. So he said to me, you know what? Rabbi Miller had once had a synagogue. He had a synagogue trip where they organized a trip to Israel, and he was going to go. And he asked for the list of who signed up to go for this trip to Israel. Looks at this list and says, this person can't afford this trip. This person can't afford the trip. This person, they can't afford to leave work. He canceled the trip. He felt like too many people were going ahead and doing things they can't afford because of the opportunity, because of the pressure. So Rav Henkin held if you start burying people in Israel, then it's going to create a pressure for everyone who can't necessarily afford it. The nice Rabbi Miller was buried in Israel. But the point is, one should think, do they want to be buried in Israel? There's pluses and minuses. Where do they want to be buried? These are serious thoughts. And I'm telling you right now, there are a lot of not wise and discerning people. They pick burial places. You go there, nobody ever visits them. Nobody ever thinks about it. It's the wrong place. You know why? They made it 20 years ago and they didn't think about what would happen in the future. Like other things we need, this is an area where one has to be thought out. Do you want a chapel service or graveside service? Right? If you have family members who are non-observants, do you want to make sure to have a shomer, tahara, halachic burial that needs to be set out? Right? If the people making decisions for you don't have your values, you better write that down. Do you have plots, which are pre-need packages? A lot less expensive. Does it say if it's only a wood casket, which is menashe? Is it Charitable like metal caskets? How about oak wood, polished oak wood? Waste of money, and we're going to break. Hachabit's not going to do it. I mean, there's Jewish law over here. You don't need to be buried in a bulletproof casket. On the contrary, you're supposed to,
Reducing grounds.
Right, but this type of casket pre-need. If there's anything that you want to be said in your eulogy, anything part about you should write that down. By the way, right? I unfortunately have given many eulogies. Some, like actually her yard site today, is Irene Sadovsky. I know. I've walked into people coming into my office 24 hours before a funeral saying, can I conduct the funeral? Sometimes I know the people, and sometimes I don't know them at all. They just have no one else, and they're asking me to do it. And I say, tell me about your relative. And they go, I've never met the person. In fact, I just met the family. What do you want me to say? What's important about this person? What do you want on your tombstone? Rabbi Menachem Levine, the greatest sage of the generation, just said what he wants on his tombstone. Very simple things. What do you want on your tombstone? I was in the cemetery, I'm looking at the tombstones of my relatives. It makes an impact on you, right? It makes an impact. Rabbi Aryeh Levine, who is known as a tzaddik of Jerusalem, he asked that on his tombstone should be written. Now, anyone knows Rabbi Aryeh Levine? He was one of the most beloved people of Israel. Secular, religious, very religious. He had tremendous impact on many of the early founders of the state of Israel, on the real Charitable part of Israel. But because he dealt with so many people, especially the early Likud, all of them, Begin, all these people were very, very close to Rabbi Levine. Sharon, you name it. He said to put on his grave, I believe with a complete faith in the resurrection of the dead. Because people would visit his grave, and they would miss him, or they'd be questioned how this great So, and anyone who goes to his grave, you can go to his grave and say he believes complete faith in the resurrection of the dead. That's what you see when you go to his grave. You know why that's on his grave? Because he wrote that he wants that on his tombstone. Is there something you want on your tombstone? Is there something that's important to you to give over to your children, grandchildren, friends, and relatives? I'm going to tell you, I haven't read too much. I'm going to be ending very briefly. An unbelievable Mavar Yabok. the Mavar Yabuk was one of the greatest Kabbalists the past few hundred years, and actually has one of the most important works on end-of-life issues. This is what he says. Zachinu bazeh, ladash v'yosa ben omer al aviv. When a son is by a father, a child by a parent, be'es pitiraso, at the time of the parent's passing, zeyah chesed ha'avim haben. It's a moment of kindness from the parent to the child, and from the child to the parent. Ha'av manchel lebeno olam hazeh. At that moment, when the parent is dying, the parent is going to give over to the child this world, material assets, l'maisa mitzvahs. It's a time where a parent gives a blessing to a child. The righteous bless their children at the time of their death, as we saw this in Parsha. Uvirusha, and he gives them an inheritance in order to be mamid al raglav. The child should have what to live with and to be successful in this world, to have the ability to live a good life and to be not to worry about parnasa and not to worry about paying their bills. And to be able to do things, and the child takes the father up to be buried and to take care of it. And then he says as follows: you see by Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov that the children did the burial, and you see that it's a tremendous comfort, spiritual comfort for the father or mother when it's a child who buries the parents. The Gamken, Vada Yeschus Lahana. It's a win for the child to do it as well. And therefore, says the Mavar Yabuk, Lo Lechinam, it's not for naught that the minig is to be makbid, to be careful that the children who are involved in the burial of the parents, right, and making these decisions, and it's a merit for both. Right? It's a merit for both. It's a merit for the children that they should be involved in it, and it's a merit for the parent that the children are involved in it. Right? So you want to make sure that you empower your children or your relatives to do this correctly. It's a big deal. That's a spiritually a big deal. And just lastly, just to end, and I'll stay here for any questions afterwards, this is just common sense. I don't want to tell you how many times common sense has not come into play. You need to have a dossier, a file, properly prepared with all your attorney information, all documentation, includes doctors, your favorite rabbi. When I say contact information, it's not a joke. Passwords to your computer. The kids can't get into the accounts. There's all kinds of things they don't have the password to. Do you have safe deposit boxes? Where are they? Where are they? Actually, the Gemara has stories of people trying to find where their parents put stuff, right? Safe deposit, bank accounts. What are the numbers? Where could they be found, right? Cemetery deeds. I've had people call me up. Where's my parent buried? I know where your parents buried. What are you asking me? I know they bought a plot somewhere. Hello? Something went wrong there. This is not uncommon. The kids have no idea where the parent bought a plot. I'm not even talking about which plot in the cemetery. They don't know what cemetery. Right? That information is just common sense. Have it in one file, one disk, where it's able to be given over. You know what happens? I'm telling you now, the best attorneys are not 24/7. They're not around sometimes. Sometimes the attorneys passed away. Right? How are you going to make sure that this is all there? Insurance information. We started out with life insurance. Life insurance is great if you know it exists, or you can prove it, or you can have it. Where is insurance information? Inventory of assets. And I was once in a shiva house in New York, and a guy walks in, and he tells the family, "I'm your father's business partner." The family had no idea that was his business partner. And he actually was not taking; he was giving. Where a guy was, I own half the stuff. I'm a little bit scared, right? But the kids didn't know. Father was very quiet about business. He didn't tell his relatives every business partner he had, right? Who knows where the assets are? Who is involved in the real estate? Nobody should be left guessing. Nobody should be left trying to figure out what the passwords are, where the safety deposits are, who's the doctors, who's the rabbis. Nobody should be left guessing. And as I started in the beginning, if you do things correctly, if we're chacham v'navon, if we're wise and discerning, we will allow ourselves to live our last days and our family members' last days in this world. If we're helping our parents, our siblings, our children, relatives, with dignity, we'll take away the Yetzer If we properly prepare our insurances, our burial plots, our healthcare proxies, our decisions about guardianship and wills and estates and trusts and having revocable trusts, we'll be able to, our final journey and our relatives' final journey should be one of meaning, one of calmness, one of appreciation. And if all of this is done, then we can really focus on what's most important and getting an eternal bank account, which is Torah and mitzvahs. All of this just allows it for us, allows us for our relatives, and hopefully this was very helpful for us today. Okay.
Thank you.